Did you enjoy playing family?
My husband Bob left all the household chores and parenting to me. I worked hard to raise our daughter. Sometimes strict, but always full of love, as if we were a real family. But words from my beloved daughter and Bob messed up all my previous thoughts. We'll divorce and cut ties then. The revenge I decided on would push the two of them to their limits. My name is Catherine. I was always the serious and top student since I was a child. Once I made up my mind, I wouldn't bend it. I am quiet, but I have a passionate personality. However, I didn't show this personality to others much and kept it hidden within, so I was really bad at expressing my feelings outwardly. Some of my friends from high school who knew my personality well even scolded me a little.
Catherine, you're really too quiet. You just go along with whatever people ask you to do. You need to learn how to say no or refuse sometimes.
After graduating from my girls' high school, I went on to a women's college through a direct entry system. While my friends seemed to be making boyfriends and having lively talks about romance, I didn't have many encounters with men, and I had never had a boyfriend. Well, strictly speaking, I did have a mutual crush with a boy who confessed to me back in middle school, and I remember holding hands and walking home together, but could that even be called having a boyfriend? I pondered over it with a bit of a dreamy feeling. Then I landed a job at a major company. As a sales assistant, my job was to support the sales team. Even though it was an office job, I was running around all day, supporting the staff, so it was incredibly busy from morning until night. But despite the overwhelming busyness, I found it enjoyable, and I was having a fulfilling life as a new employee. My nature of being serious and diligently completing any task I was assigned paid off, and I received high praise from my boss, and was even quite popular among clients, which was something I was very thankful for. In the midst of my busy days at work, I had an unexpected encounter.
Catherine, you're working hard again today. Everyone's already gone home, but you're still here. That's awesome. Here, take this.
As everyone else headed home, I quietly stayed behind, working overtime. Bob, one of the sales staff, came over and handed me a coffee he'd likely bought from a cafe. "Oh, thank you so much."
No worries.
Bob said that and laughed. He was very friendly to the female staff and seemed quite popular. Even my glamorous coworkers admired him. That Bob handed me a drink. I felt my heart flutter in an instant. Maybe it was due to my lack of romantic experience, but I could feel my cheeks flush. Looking back, I didn't understand why a popular guy like Bob would choose someone as plain as me, but this day working late marked the start of our relationship. Of course, the other female staff didn't take it well, but that was only at the beginning. Bob was used to being around women and acted like a true gentleman.
I've always been pretty popular. Maybe it's because I'm considerate? Just kidding.
He would escort me carefully on our dates, smiling as if he were joking. It was no wonder he was popular with women. He truly had the aura of a guy who attracted attention. As a sales rep, Bob's job often required him to go to dinners and pubs with his clients. "It's not that I don't trust you, but I feel a little uneasy sometimes." I remember once expressing my concern.
Wow, I didn't expect that. I thought you weren't the type to say stuff like that, Catherine.
Bob seemed a bit surprised, maybe even slightly annoyed. Sensing that weary vibe, I stopped bringing up anything about other women after that. Even though I lacked confidence in my appearance, I felt secure in our relationship and bond. That's because Bob had practically moved into my apartment in a cohabitation setup. Bob, being somewhat of a laid-back husband, didn't even take out the trash. Of course, I handled all the housework. I once even confided in an old friend over lunch.
Well, he's a popular guy, right? You gotta pamper him a little, or he might go off to some other woman.
Her words made sense, and I couldn't argue with her logic. Bob himself always complimented me with things like,
I'd be totally lost without you, Catherine. You can handle my work and the house. You're seriously the best.
I didn't mind being busy and actually enjoyed supporting someone else. It was in my nature to do so. Taking care of Bob, who only ever relied on me, wasn't all that bad. Our relationship dragged on for 6 years, and my parents started asking more about my marriage.
Is this guy really treating you well? Isn't it about time you two got married?
Come on, honey. It's a big responsibility for him, too. Don't rush him like that. It's not fair.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, Catherine.
My mom, always concerned about me, and my dad, who empathized with Bob's position as a man. I really thought I had great parents. Of course, I'm thinking about it. Well, eventually. At first, I brushed it off like that, but even I started to worry about our future. I wasn't someone who was overly eager to get married, but after 6 years of living together, wasn't it basically the same as being married already? Was it okay to continue like this? These thoughts began to weigh on me. Then, after I turned 30, I finally decided to bring it up with Bob. So, what's next for us? I'm 30 now, and if you're not planning on getting married, maybe we should end things.
What? Yeah, well, I guess.
Bob let out a small sigh, or at least it looked that way, but I wasn't sure. There was a long, heavy silence, and just as I was about to speak again,
All right then, let's just get married.
it was such a casual proposal. It wasn't the kind of dramatic proposal I had dreamed of, with a bouquet of roses and whispered words of love, but I was still really happy that Bob had finally made up his mind.
If we're getting married, I have one condition. I want you to keep working hard. You know, it's a time when women need to be independent too.
Yeah, I plan to. I love my jobs.
I'm still going to have a lot of work dinners and drinks like always. You'll still support me, right?
After that conversation, I decided to continue working. Many of Bob's female colleagues, especially in the busy sales department, had left their jobs after getting married, but I chose to keep working. I married Bob, believing we could maintain an independent relationship while eventually having kids, raising them, and building a loving family together, leading a happy life, or so I thought at the time. Bob and I officially registered our marriage. My parents, who had long been looking forward to my marriage, were overjoyed. That being said, after living together for 6 years, our newlywed life wasn't as happy as I had imagined. We both continued working as usual and lived our lives freely. Bob's late nights didn't change, and I was constantly busy with both work and housework. We spent some weekends together, but even on days off, Bob always seemed busy.
I'm going golfing with my boss this weekend. Next week, I'm going on a trip with my coworkers.
I couldn't help but feel frustrated, thinking that nothing had really changed since before we got married. But I was also busy at work, so I chose to focus on that and not dwell on it too much. About a year into this routine, a thought crossed my mind. Looking back, even during our dating days, Bob and I didn't have much physical affection. But now that we were married, I wanted to talk about family planning. Since I was already over 30, I was starting to feel anxious about when I'd have kids. So Bob, what do you think about having kids? Have you thought about what we're going to do in the future? It was one of the rare weekends we were spending together, and Bob was engrossed in playing a game on his phone while sitting on the couch.
What? Kids?
Startled, Bob dropped his phone the moment I spoke. His reaction was something I hadn't expected. "Why are you so flustered? Are you okay? What's going on?" He was visibly shaken, blinking rapidly, and scratching his head nervously. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" I asked as calmly as I could.
About kids? Sorry, but
Bob mumbled in a low voice, fidgeting uncomfortably. "What? I can't hear you. Speak clearly. I'm listening." Prompted by me, Bob muttered while looking down.
it's about my kid. I might have to take in and raise my child. Maybe.
My mind went blank, and I had no idea what he was talking about. As Bob explained, he had been cheating on me with multiple women over the past 7 years, including the time we were together. And recently, one of those women, a girl named Jessica, showed up at our house with a piece of paper and a newborn baby. That day, I was working late, and Bob had come home before me. I don't know if she timed it intentionally, but Jessica appeared, holding the baby.
This baby is definitely yours. You're going to take responsibility and raise her. I can't do it.
With just those words, she pushed the baby onto Bob and ran off. Bob explained that Jessica was a girl he'd met in the nightlife scene, and he wasn't even sure what she did for a living. "So where's the baby now?"
I panicked because I didn't want you to find out, so I took her to my parents' place. They're watching her now.
Seeing Bob looking so apologetic, I couldn't help but let out a big sigh. "Your parents aren't in the best health, right? You made this mess, so you can't just dump it on others." Bob told me Jessica was 19 years old. I couldn't imagine how hard it must have been for a young woman to give birth alone, with no one to turn to. Thinking about what Jessica had gone through, I couldn't just brush her off. Sure, part of me wanted to throw everything away and run. I thought about putting the baby up for adoption or divorcing Bob. A lot of thoughts raced through my mind, but I knew I couldn't just walk away. "All right, let's go get the baby."
Really?
"We'll do a DNA test first. If she really is your child, we'll raise her as our own. But don't ever make the same mistake again. There won't be a next time." I made up my mind and told Bob firmly.
Thank you so much. You're really the best, Catherine.
With tears in his eyes, Bob grabbed my hands and hugged me tightly. It was an unusually affectionate gesture for someone like him, who had never been big on physical touch with me. Of course, it seemed like he'd had plenty of physical affection with other women. We did the DNA test, and as it turned out, the baby was indeed Bob's. Along with the baby, there was a birth certificate that had the name Alice on it. It was the name Jessica had given her. Bob and I decided to go through the process of formally adopting Alice. I didn't want to erase all traces of Jessica, the girl who was once Bob's mistress. Honestly, I hated Jessica for what she had done. But I couldn't forget a story my mom had told me. My maternal grandmother had passed away shortly after giving birth to my mom. My mom often said, "I wish I could have touched the mother who gave birth to me, even just once." That memory stayed with me. Bob and I had a long talk. Let's keep the adoption a secret until Alice is grown, until she needs to know, like when she's getting married.
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe when she's getting married.
Right. Until then, I want to live as a real family. Please promise me. We made a firm agreement. Alice, so tiny and precious, made me realize how much I wanted to protect her. I decided to take a break from work to be by her side. I want to be there for Alice. Bob, who had initially hoped we both keep working after getting married, couldn't argue with my decision to raise Alice.
All right, please take care of Alice. But once things settle down with parenting,
Yeah, I know. Once things are under control, I'll start looking for work again. After that conversation, I left the company where I had met Bob. However, even after putting Alice to bed, I worked from home at night, trying to contribute to the household finances as much as possible.
Catherine, you're really a hardworking and capable woman. It's rare to find someone as independent as you.
Bob would compliment me like that when he saw my efforts.
I'm working hard for the family. I'm gonna give it my all to make you and Alice happy.
But despite those enthusiastic words, Bob barely did anything that resembled family duties. As a first-time mother overwhelmed with things I didn't know, I was barely keeping it together, but Bob seemed to act like it wasn't his problem. He still went to many work drinks, and his return home was always late. Everything felt restrictive, and I was exhausted. But Alice only had me. I had to protect her. That's how I kept motivating myself, pushing through it all. Since Alice wasn't my biological child and there were some complications, I found it hard to talk to my real-life friends about parenting. My only solace was searching the internet. On every forum, there were complaints about husbands. Whether it was a biological child or not, I realized that families everywhere were dealing with the same problems, which brought me some relief.
Mom, I'm off.
Be careful, okay? Watch out for cars.
I know. You work hard, Mom.
As Alice entered elementary school and became more independent, I was able to secure more time for my remote work. By the time she was old enough for me to trust her with the house key, I re-entered the workforce. I decided to challenge myself with a job I had always wanted to try. Since I'd always loved working, I felt a deep sense of happiness returning to the workforce. When Alice hit her rebellious teenage years, I tried my best to face the challenges as a mother. But the wall between us grew tall and thick. She stopped making eye contact, and sometimes she wouldn't even respond to me. When she did, her attitude was cold and distant. I looked it up online, and they said it was typical teenage behavior, so I wasn't too worried. While I was doing my best to deal with her teenage rebellion, Bob, who had been uninvolved in parenting up to that point, suddenly became close with Alice. It made sense that she would feel more comfortable with him, given the tension between us. I watched them laugh together, finding their father-daughter bond heartwarming. Hey, let me join in. I'd say cheerfully sometimes, but I'd just get ignored.
She's going through her rebellious phase. It can't be helped.
Bob would say with a laugh, patting on my shoulder. I decided to keep quiet and just provide financially. That's when I started putting even more effort into my work. One day, as suddenly as it began, Alice's rebellious phase ended. She returned to her old self, or even a more cheerful and energetic version.
Mom, I'm sorry for how I acted. I've been reflecting on how horrible I was.
It's okay. I went through a similar phase. It's something everyone has to go through. Just like that, we were able to rebuild our close mother-daughter relationship. At least, that's what I thought. After coming out of her teenage phase, Alice became much better at asking for things sweetly. She started asking for more allowance, but I figured it was because, as a high schooler, she probably had more social obligations with friends. So, I tried to support her as much as I could. I reminded myself that I was the same way when I was younger, and it was much better than dealing with her rebellion. We sent Alice to college without the need for student loans, and even supported her short-term study abroad program, fulfilling our duties as parents.
Thanks, Mom. I love you.
She'd say that with such a cute smile, and it made me so happy as a mother. Watching Alice grow into a responsible adult and leave the nest filled me with emotion, and I couldn't help but tear up. Even after Alice became an adult, she kept asking for money.
Mom, I've been going out to so many parties lately, and I'm broke. Can you help me out? There's this brand name bag I really want. Can we go to the outlet mall together? I want you to help me pick it out.
I would often splurge on gifts for my cute only daughter. Parenting was already behind me, and I had enough financial leeway, so it didn't bother me much. I wanted to happily give her the occasional present. But a few years later, everything changed suddenly.
I'm getting married.
Alice told me. Her boyfriend was the son of a company president, apparently. I was overjoyed at the news of my only daughter's engagement. But my heart tightened as I realized the time had finally come to tell Alice the truth about our relationship. "Congratulations! I'm so happy for you. I can't wait for your wedding," I responded cheerfully. But Alice didn't smile back at me.
I don't invite you to my wedding. You're a stranger.
What? What do you mean? My vision went blank, and I felt confused. I hadn't told Alice the truth yet. Why was she saying this? As I stood there, bewildered, Alice continued.
Dad told me when I was in middle school. He said you're not my real mom, that you're just a stranger.
I felt a wave of despair so overwhelming that I almost lost consciousness. Struggling to control my breathing, I looked at Bob, who smirked at me with disdain in his eyes.
So, how was it? Did you enjoy playing family?
Back then, I found you so annoying, Mom. That's when Dad told me. She's not your real mom, so she doesn't understand how you feel. But she's got money, so just keep her happy and make sure she keeps giving you cash.
Alice said this nonchalantly as she played with her long, silky hair.
Once I knew we weren't related by blood, it all made sense. So, I used you a lot after that.
I never imagined I would hear such words from the daughter I had lovingly raised all these years.
It's hilarious, isn't it? She spent all that money raising you even though you're not related by blood. Catherine's just been an ATM and housekeeper this whole time.
Bob and Alice exchanged a small high five and laughed together. Alice's partner is the son of a company president, so he's expected to take over the business one day. She probably thought she wouldn't need my financial support anymore. I took several deep breaths, quickly processing all the information. After taking stock of the situation, I let out a heavy sigh. All right, divorce and cutting ties it is. I responded with extreme calm.
What?
What?
Bob and Alice seemed a bit shaken, clearly not expecting my reaction. "Since you're marrying into a wealthy family, you won't need me," your ATM anymore. Best of luck. Let's move ahead with the divorce and severing of ties. I began tidying up the clutter around me.
Wait, you have to attend the meeting with his family. He's from a prestigious family, and I need you there for appearances.
Alice sounded panicked.
On the wedding day, we'll just tell them you passed away. I've already told them you're in poor health. We'll invite my biological mom, Jessica, and introduce her as my aunt.
Alice said this excitedly. At that time, it seemed they still hadn't found Jessica's whereabouts. Alice was eager to hire a private investigator to track her down. In the end, Bob and I divorced, and Alice and I cut ties. We agreed that I would attend the family introductions as planned, even as the paperwork to formalize everything was underway. The family meeting was a month away. Determined to do what I could before then, I prepared myself mentally. And finally, the day of the family introductions arrived. The location Alice had chosen was a famous upscale restaurant.
Make sure you don't embarrass me, okay?
Alice insisted. It was clear she no longer felt any gratitude for the way I'd raised her. Dressed in the designer clothes I had gifted her, she bossed me around. Yes, I got it. Exasperated by Alice's demands, I let out a small sigh. Though perhaps what really annoyed me most was the fact that I had raised a daughter like this. Alice's partner was named Jack. She had shown me pictures of him before, but in person, he was even more handsome. His parents were impeccably groomed, and it was immediately obvious that they were wealthy. Alice carried herself with as much elegance as Jack's family. Of course, all the luxury items she wore were things I had bought for her.
Catherine, how are you feeling?
Jack's mother asked, looking at me with concern. Apparently, in Alice's storyline, I was supposed to die before the wedding, so I was pretending to be in poor health. Thank you for asking. I'm just looking forward to seeing my daughter on her big day, I replied, playing along.
I heard Alice studied abroad. That must have been a wonderful experience.
Yes, just 2 weeks in Italy. It was a short trip, but I heard she had a great time.
2 weeks, you say?
Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Alice glaring at me, but I didn't back down.
But look at her. She's working hard, managing everything, and dressed so beautifully. Doesn't she look stunning in her outfit?
Thank you. I picked out and gifted her everything she's wearing. I'm honored you noticed.
Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry about that.
A heavy silence fell over the table, and Jack glanced at Alice with concern. Under the table, Alice hit my hand and nudged my leg.
Sorry about my mom. She doesn't have much time left, and her mind gets a little confused sometimes. I'll just take her to the restroom for a moment. Come on, Mom.
With that, she dragged me by the arm out of the room. Once we were alone, Alice began to scold me in a rapid whisper.
Are you trying to ruin my engagement?
I only told the truth. I said I'd attend the meeting, but I never promised to lie. I stood firm, and Alice clicked her tongue, glaring at me with fury. You'd better get back to the table before your dad makes a mess of things, I said, watching as Alice stormed back into the room, clearly frustrated. I followed her, smiling as I returned to my seat. Jack's father turned to Alice, looking serious.
We're not old-fashioned or strict. Jack has chosen you, and we're here to support him. Isn't that right, Jack?
Yeah.
Jack responded, wearing the same serious expression as his father. Though Alice seemed anxious, she was clearly moved by her future in-law's generosity. The wedding date was set for 6 months later. Since it was to be a grand affair befitting a prominent family, Alice was fully committed to making it perfect. However, Jack would be working abroad for the next 6 months, so they wouldn't be seeing much of each other. Alice seemed a little down about that, but she was already dreaming about the luxurious life that awaited her. As for Bob, he was still heavily indulging in his womanizing ways, especially now that our divorce was settled. I had already made it clear that I didn't care, as long as he acted like a responsible adult and maintained some decorum. With that permission, Bob was living it up. Bob had always been popular with women, and even though he was getting older, it seemed women still flocked to him. My only wish was that no more women like me would have to suffer. That was all I wanted.
Planning a wedding is supposed to be a huge hassle, right? But Jack's family butler is handling everything, including the invitations. Isn't that awesome?
Alice said, showing no interest in participating in the wedding preparations. Her lazy, dependent personality had clearly not changed. Then, news came that Jessica's whereabouts had been discovered. I had a friend who was a private investigator, so I introduced him to Alice. When she heard he would do it for free, she jumped at the offer.
I saw a picture of Jessica, and she's absolutely stunning. I haven't met her yet, but just seeing her photo made me feel a connection, you know?
Alice was thrilled, dreaming of the wealthy and happy life that awaited her. Then, one day as the wedding approached, my divorce and separation were finalized. Thanks for everything. If you ever need help, don't hesitate to call me. I said my final goodbyes as I packed my things and prepared to leave the house. But Alice and Bob were ice cold.
Call? Yeah, no. You're already dead to me.
Thanks for your service as a maid and ATM.
At that point, I didn't even feel sad anymore. We were truly strangers now. With a sense of relief in my heart, I walked out of the houses. It was on the day of Alice's wedding. I was enjoying a peaceful tea time at a nearby cafe, just as the ceremony was supposed to begin. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Alice.
What the hell is going on? You know where it is, don't you? Get here now.
Alice's panicked voice screamed through the phone, half hysterical. I had expected a call like this. I finished my coffee in one gulp and leisurely made my way to the wedding venue, which was right next door. When I arrived, the place was eerily quiet. No hustle, no bustle. I headed toward the grand hall where the lavish reception was supposed to be held. There I found Alice, her face flushed red, and Bob, looking pale as a ghost. But besides them, there were no staff, no large crowd of guests. In the room were Alice, Bob, the elderly couple who were supposed to become Alice's in-laws, and Jack. There were also 3 women standing there, each with a young child. The joyful wedding atmosphere was completely absent, replaced by a tense and strained air. As soon as Alice spotted me, she screamed.
Mom, explain this. You planned this, didn't you? Are you trying to humiliate me?
Stop calling me Mom.
Who cares about that? Did you ruin my wedding? You're the worst.
While Alice raged, Bob stood frozen, trying to blend into the background, avoiding eye contact with the women. You shouldn't get married. Jack's family will only suffer.
I don't get it. Say it clearly.
Well, after I finished raising you, I started running a company. At first, it was tough, but things quickly took off, and I expanded my businesses. One of the companies I acquired was Jack's father's company. Hearing this, both Alice and Bob were left speechless, their mouths hanging open. While raising Alice, I worked steadily and eventually became a business owner with a significant amount of wealth. That wealth amounted to several $billion. Buying Alice the occasional designer item had been easy for me.
Catherine saved my company when it was on the verge of collapse. And now this. I'm sorry we deceived you, Alice.
Wait, since when? When did you plan all of this?
Alice stammered, her hands trembling as she spoke to me. Ever since I found out Jack was your partner, by the time we had that family meeting, Jack and his parents already knew everything about you.
Since way back then?
Alice collapsed to her knees. I was so happy when I heard you were getting married. When I heard your partner was Jack, I wanted to congratulate you from the bottom of my heart. But then, after everything you did to me, I must have failed as a mother. I said to Alice.
When Catherine told me about Alice's true nature, I was shocked and sad. But honestly, I'd already suspected that you might be after my money. So in a way, it wasn't really a surprise.
Jack added, sounding half exasperated. Before the family meeting had taken place, I had already told Jack and his parents everything, warning them that they should call off the wedding. That's how this whole revenge plan came together.
Wait, Jack. I'll change, I promise. Just give me another chance.
Alice begged Jack, clinging to him.
Pretending your mom was dead, that's just too much. I can't start over with you. I'm sorry.
Jack gently but firmly rejected her.
It's over. My life is ruined. Now no one will support me.
Alice screamed. Your parents are Bob and Jessica. Jessica's here, right? Come on out. I called out loudly, and Jessica emerged from the corner of the hall. But the woman who staggered forward was not the elegant lady Alice had seen in the photos. Her teeth were discolored and missing. She scratched at her tangled, dirty blonde hair, and she wore a tattered, stained t-shirt with holes.
Jessica, this can't be real.
Alice gasped, staring at Jessica in disbelief. You used a detective to find Jessica, right? That detective worked for me first. I told him to give you false information. We picked a random stock photo of an elegant woman and sent it to you. This is the real Jessica, your mother. I'm glad you finally got to meet her. I smiled. The real Jessica wasn't an elegant woman at all. She was a homeless woman buried in debt. Alice could only tremble, unable to process what was happening. Bob, your turn now, I said, and Bob's pale face snapped up in panic. You're still fooling around with women, but don't you think it's time to start acting like an adult? You should at least take responsibility where it matters. I glanced at the women standing with their young children. Look, you've fathered even more children. Make sure you pay child support for all of them. I'm not involved anymore, but don't make them suffer, I said firmly. Bob had been fooling around so much that he'd ended up fathering children with 3 different women, all of whom were now present with their kids. Bob hadn't known about this until now, and it was only today that he found out. DNA tests had already been done, confirming that all of the children were his.
No, please, Catherine, wait.
Bob pleaded with me.
You told me you were single.
You said we'd be happy if we had a baby together. Was that a lie?
You can't be serious. You promised we'd get married. I'll sue you.
The women, all of whom had been deceived by Bob, began to shout at him in unison. Bob, sniffling and sobbing, collapsed into tears, streams of snot running down his face.
Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. You're the one who loved and raised me all these years.
That's right. No matter what, the best woman who stuck with me was Catherine. Please, help me again this time. We're family, right?
Both Alice and Bob, realizing my wealth, now turned to me in desperation. Stop it. I'm done playing family. Did you forget? I said firmly, and with that, both Alice and Bob crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Their cries echoed emptily through the vast wedding hall. Unsurprisingly, Alice's engagement was called off. Though our ties had been severed, Alice would still inherit the debts of her biological mother, Jessica, ensuring a future burdened with financial woes. As for Bob, he faced multiple lawsuits from the women he had deceived, who accused him of lying about being single and abandoning them after learning they were pregnant. Naturally, he was also obligated to pay child support for all of his children, albeit in small amounts for each. With only his salary as a company employee, Bob's financial situation is dire. He sold the house and moved into a rundown apartment. He works multiple part-time jobs, laboring day and night, even on weekends, with no time off. As for Alice, her spending habits haven't improved. She's living on credit, juggling loans and barely getting by, essentially living paycheck to paycheck. Frustrated with her daily struggles, she hasn't given up on marrying a wealthy man and has started attending matchmaking events again. But with her debts and complicated family situation, no one is interested. Meanwhile, my company continues to grow, with more successes and an increasing number of subsidiaries. I'm living a fulfilling life, managing a thriving business. I'm currently in a relationship with a man who is the CEO of another company, and while we're happy together, we're in no rush to remarry. We support each other as good partners, living a balanced and independent life. I've come to believe that in life, money and blood ties aren't the most important things. What matters is choosing the best actions you can, following through, and walking your own path with confidence. Rather than relying on others to make you happy, leaning on them for support, the key to a fulfilling life is standing firmly on your own 2 feet.